before week 6 of the fantasy football season. What's going on, football fans and fantasy freaks? It's Mitch here with my 10 must-adds of week 6. If that sounds good, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly fantasy football must-adds, must-target players, and comment any questions about your fantasy football team. Let's get started with the must-add player of the week. A guy that I loved this offseason, a rookie, Tyrone Tracy Jr. from the New York Giants. I warned you, this kid can play. And he showcased that in Seattle in his first ever start and a breakout game. Tyrone Tracy, 18 attempts, 129 rushing yards, and a reception on the day. But most importantly, he showcased a rushing capability at the NFL level. He's put up pretty good yards per carry on the season, pretty efficient football on the ground. And that's great for him. Why? Because at Purdue, he was a wide receiver turned running back. So he is a very inexperienced player at this position, running the football, seeing the lanes, right? Hitting the holes of a rushing attack. But he showcased at the NFL level, he can be explosive. He can be decisive. He can be efficient. In fact, he's been legit all year with the limited touches he has seen. And given the situation he is in with Devin Singletary as the starter, a very replaceable running back in front of him who's currently injured, if Tracy can continue to get these opportunities, he is going to surpass Singletary as a starter in the NFL and the starter for the G-Men. So Tracy, pick him up. Pick him up. Spend on Tracy. Waiver priority on Tracy. I think he's legit because I not only see a short-term prospect. By the way, the Giants offense looked pretty darn efficient without their best player, Malik Neighbors, against what was thought to be a decent defense in the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, a hostile environment. So if this offense can continue to play kind of like that for the rest of the year, and Tracy maybe is not a bell cow once Singletary returns, but I think he'll be a factor. I definitely think so. I mean, the future is Tracy. It's not Singletary, right? So I definitely feel that he is somebody I am targeting everywhere if he's not already on my teams, because I drafted a bunch of him like the last round, and he's been a stash for me, but also at the same time, he's been a guy I've been targeting to pick up all year and kind of been eyeing a Singletary injury. Once Singletary got hurt, he's somebody I immediately went to the waiver wire to pick up, and I did get him in a couple of leagues. So I'm very excited about that. He's somebody that I think long-term could be a breakout running back for the rest of the year. But it depends on Singletary. It depends on what Brian Daboll wants to do at this position. I would not rule out Singletary returning and becoming the starter once again. But I think that Tracy has opened the door for the possibility of more competition there, and then the possibility for him to take the job ultimately. So Tracy Jr. of the Giants at running back is the target that I wanted to discuss first. Second, we're going to bring up a name that we've already discussed before, but again, he has another great performance. That's Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jags. If Bigsby is not owned in your league, you need to pick him up, right? Like pretty much in every league at this point. Like past weeks, we talked about him as like, okay, he's a stash. If ETN gets hurt, like he's a great kind of like stash to have. He's going to be a plug-and-play player. He's a handcuff, so to speak. But that has continued to kind of prove otherwise because Tank Bigsby has arguably outplayed, and maybe not even arguably outplayed. He has outproduced. He has outperformed. He has out-explosived Travis Etienne, period. I mean, 34 attempts, 273 yards on the season. Seems like every time this guy gets the ball, he's a threat with speed and power and a rare combination that way. Has 2 touchdowns on the season. He does lack in the receiving department, and that's probably where Travis Etienne still has the upper hand. But Bigsby as a pure in-between-the-tackles runner gives something to this team that it feels like Etienne is not. and it gives them balance. They need this balance with the state of the offensive line, with the pass protection they have, with how Trevor Lawrence is playing. They need to rely on this running game. So Tank Bigsby, he is like in a full-blown 1-2, 1A, 1B type of punch right now in Jacksonville. So he's absolutely, if he's not already owned, has to be owned. And you should be looking to pick him up because he's legitimately good at football and he's in a pretty interesting situation to the point where he's startable every week, it feels like, as a flex. But if ETN gets hurt, he becomes like a very viable, pretty much RB1 type of player or very close to that. So Bigsby is definitely an ad. At wide receiver, Jaylen Tolbert is the first name that exploded onto the scene this weekend. On Sunday Night Football, Tolbert took over as the wide receiver 2 in the offense with Brandon Cooks being out for quite a while, if not the entirety of the season, with a bit of a knee issue in terms of infection. So Jaylen Tolbert, he got more reps, he got more shine, and he ultimately showed up in a big way against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not an easy defense to perform against. Tolbert took advantage of the weaker corner in Dante Jackson, and I thought consistently showed his ability to run routes, have soft spots in the zone, soft hands, and then also, in the biggest moment of the game, catch a clutch touchdown. Like, Jaylen Tolbert showed that he has rapport with Dak Prescott, the trust of Dak Prescott, and he's that next guy. Like, after CeeDee Lamb, after Ferguson, the guy that's getting the ball is Tolbert, and when he has a good matchup, Dak trusts him to make a play, rather one-on-one in a contested situation, or even to separate on a route. And it feels like he has a well-blended skill set to be able to play inside, outside, run downfield, run underneath. So I think like with Brandon Cooks out, it's almost like it changes the game for this offense where Turpin is not a proper wide receiver 3. The targets that would go to Tolbert and to Cooks are now only going to Tolbert, it feels like. So while Turpin is kind of involved as a trickery player and a run player, Tolbert is getting more targets and more shine because of the role that Cooks has kind of vacated now. So he's playing more outside and more reps and more snaps overall. So Tolbert is definitely somebody, if you need depth at the position, I would definitely look to pick him up. Michael Wilson is also an intriguing depth add. I would argue, though, in a little bit deeper settings and deeper leagues, he has just looked good. 19 catches on 26 targets this year for 216 yards. He had another good productive game against the 49ers, and I believe he led the Cardinals in receiving yards this past week. He was the most consistent option, and Kyler feels very confident in him. It feels like he is clearly the number 3 option, kind of like Tolbert in this passing game. It goes Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, pretty much 1A, 1B, and then Michael Wilson. And Wilson's actually been getting more yards, more targets the last couple of weeks than Marvin Harrison, but it could be matchup based. But what we've seen with Wilson is kind of like Tolbert. He has the size to play outside. He can get off the line against press coverage, but he's also good enough, strong enough, kind of against that contact in the middle of the field where he doesn't fear it. He's able to go over the middle and play slot really well. And I actually think that's his best role, is kind of like a big slot player, which Kyler has used quite frequently, and they actually design targets to, and he catches more shallow passes in that position. So Michael Wilson could be somebody to stash on your bench as a potential bye week replacement, most likely, but maybe even a flex option dependent on the matchup. Allen Lazard is just somebody that continues to get my attention. Every single week you watch the Jets and he's getting a ton of targets. I mean, this guy's been getting like 8 targets a game for the last couple of weeks. 34 targets, 20 receptions, 240 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the season, and he's been a primary red zone option with 4 touchdowns on the year. He's been a third down option. He's been a slot option for Aaron Rodgers. And Rodgers just trusts him. One-on-one situations to contested catch. He has great rapport with him from his Packer days. And he just trusts him to be in the right spot against zone coverage. So no matter really where he lines up, Rodgers is going to look for him because he's the guy that he knows how his body language works, where he's going to be, right? So it's the simple things like that that transfer. And in this offense that's quite simplistic with the Jets, it's not going to be a lot of targets that are kind of funneled through design touches. It's more of a traditional kind of old school West Coast offense where Rodgers is reading the field and he's going to the matchup or he's going to the guy that he feels best about on that play. And Lazard is often running these like spot routes against zone coverage where he's finding the soft spots and he reads it the same way as Rodgers. Or Garrett Wilson is drawing against man coverage the better corner while he is getting a better matchup, which largely has allowed Lazard to feast on easier matchups. So Lazard is somebody that I would look to pick up, especially when the bye weeks come, as he could be a touchdown threat in pretty much every game right now that the Jets are playing, as long as they don't trade for Devontae Adams. The Indianapolis Colts have a few receivers, or a couple, I should say, that you should pick up. I would not include Mitchell in this conversation, the rookie, but Alec Pierce is going to be the first that I will include because his yards per reception number at 28.3 is absolutely ludicrous. We saw him go off the first couple of weeks with Anthony Richardson throwing the ball down the field. We've now seen Joe Flacco throw him the ball down the field, and he's been the primary X receiver for the Colts. He plays a lot out wide. He does play a little bit vertical slot, but he's a big-bodied guy, 6'4", 6'5", that can really run like a 4.4, 4.3 type speed. He can get down the field, he can fly by people, and he's showcased an evolution into his game, like more maturity in his game and an ability to make more big plays. And Flacco immediately went to him on these deep plays to get them back in this game. He has 368 yards on the year. Like, that's a pretty good number right now. That's like top 30 in the NFL, if not top 25 in the NFL. And he has 3 touchdowns on top of that. Now, obviously, you have to kind of look at the 368 yards on only 17 targets and 13 receptions. That is very shady, in my opinion. Like, there's not a lot of reliability there. But if you need somebody on your team that provides a little bit more explosiveness to your lineup, especially if Joe Flacco is going to be playing quarterback for this team, I think that Alec Pierce is worth the pickup because Joe Flacco is playing unbelievable. He's playing like a younger quarterback. He's playing like a guy that's playing in his prime, and he's getting the ball down the field. And with the state of this defense in Indy, you're going to want to pick up every receiver you can get. I mean, this offense is legitimately well schemed. They have a great offensive line. They've shown that they can operate with multiple quarterbacks, although Flacco's the much better passer. And they can have multiple players in this offense be successful for fantasy, and that's why Josh Downs is also a very good option. Downs, I would say, is better for PPR, while Alec Pierce is better for standard leagues. And on that dial, I would look for Alec Pierce in more of a best ball type format, a daily fantasy format, maybe even like half PPR, while Josh Downs is more of a PPR guy. 20 catches on 26 targets so far this year. The yards are rather limited at 173. But Josh Downs, I said it, and I've said it before, he's a legitimately good player. He can separate, he can run routes. He does have a little bit of speed and a smaller package to go down the field, but he's primarily that middle of the field target type of guy, which, you know, Michael Pittman isn't really that player. He's more of a possession player, and he's largely been limited due to the corner matchups he's seen. Pierce is a downfield target. Mitchell is a primary outside receiver. Josh Downs is the short, kind of stocky, little quick, swift type of underneath guy that can really do damage over the intermediate. And again, if Flacco is there, Downs becomes very interesting because Flacco has shown a capacity last year with Amari Cooper, years previous with Garrett Wilson, way back with Steve Smith and Anquan Bolden. He likes these style of receivers, kind of feisty, smaller packaged receivers. Also on top of that, like, he's shown production for receivers. He's been able to provide it. So as long as Joe Flacco is there, Downs is great. Now, I will say Richardson has been named the starter going forward if he's healthy. I'm not sure how often he's going to be healthy, though. That's the thing. I don't really know, but Richardson's way more unreliable. I think Pierce is better with Richardson than Downs, arguably, but I think both of them are definitely deserving of pickups and seeing how that whole conversation and situation plays out. Pat's wide receivers. And I bring them up. A lot of people are going to kind of scoff at this, but I bring the Pats receivers up because Drake May might be playing against the Houston Texans. And it might not happen against the Texans, but I think sometime in the future, Drake May is going to prove that he's a legitimate NFL quarterback. He's got a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and I think he'll be able to make a lot of throws. And I think the difference between Drake May and Jacoby Brissett is the aggression in their play. May is definitely going to be more willing to rip the ball at the middle level of the field and throw the ball into tight windows as he did at North Carolina. He also has an excellent deep ball. So Jalen Polk has been getting a lot of downfield targets and receptions. He hasn't necessarily come through in all of those, but he has had 19 targets. He only has 74 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown. He should have had another touchdown that would have put them up against the Dolphins for a game winner, but there was kind of a weird rule that kind of disallowed that. If you did see that, it was wacky, it was wild. But Polk definitely died off that kind of sort of hype that he had this offseason, and might have had even more hype with the Drake May stuff if he would have caught that touchdown successfully, but he did not. And so I would look at Polk because they drafted him for a reason. They drafted him with May for a reason. And he's been playing a lot, especially on the outside. So look for him to become a possession target for May, but also a downfield target for May, given his contested catch ability. Now, the guy that I really like personally is Demario Douglas. With Drake May, he has been the most successful receiver on the Patriots with Jacoby Brissett, with 18 catches for 153 yards on 24 targets. Now, the general offense is probably going to be more productive. The yards are going to be higher. There's just because of the aggression of the passer and the player. Despite being a rookie, I think there's going to be more passing yards for the Patriots if May plays at some point soon. And Demario Douglas is a player that's actually a lot like Josh Downs. Josh Downs played at North Carolina with Drake May. Demario Douglas is the separator of the Patriots receiving core. He's the guy that gets open against man coverage. Given a lot of teams don't respect the Patriots receivers, they're going to play man coverage. They're going to test their ability. And May will throw that ball to him consistently at the middle of the field. And I think Douglas is also the best after the catch as well. So he just brings a lot of things to the table. He brings a guy that's going to catch screens and manufactured touches. He's a guy that can make plays at the intermediate level, and he's a guy that I feel can catch in tight windows like Drake May wants to throw that BB right in there for a first down. Kendrick Bourne is the final guy. Kendrick Bourne is the veteran they re-signed. Kendrick Bourne has been the best receiver on the Patriots from 2021 through 2023. The most talented, the best player, the most productive. Kendrick Bourne was the best player in 2023, and he was right there with Jacoby Myers during 2021, 2022, and had more explosiveness to his game. Now, he is coming off a major injury, but Bourne is trusted. He's a veteran that was paid a nice contract, and if he sees more time in the offense, he'll definitely be worth kind of a little bit of a flyer just to see who takes priority for Drake May. Is it the veteran Kendrick Bourne? Is it the rookie Jaylen Polk? Or is it the second-year receiver that's maybe in his breakout stage, Demario Douglas? I would lean Douglas, Polk, then Bourne, but that's my personal preference. Rams wide receivers, Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington. Whittington is interesting because he had another successful week this week with a lot of targets and a lot of receptions. He's an underneath intermediate level guy, but he has converted 23 of his targets into 18 catches, only 5 incompletions with Matthew Stafford, 201 yards, no touchdowns, but Whittington is pretty good again, after the catch. He is pretty physical, and he's kind of like a Puka Nacua light. He can work the middle of the field successfully against zone, and I feel like Stafford trusts the young kid, and they like to use him in a lot of different ways, motion and things like that to try to separate him and get him open, and he's a hybrid, versatile player. So Whittington is somebody that, with Nacua out, I would continue to look at him as the guy that's sort of replacing his role. Tutu Atwell has brought a different dimension to the offense in terms of downfield targets, downfield ability. He has great speed, and he has that ability to snap his routes off at the top to be able to make some separation and catch the ball. Stafford has looked for him pretty often. He has 17 catches on 25 targets for 281 yards this year. I would say that his game is more volatile than Whittington on a weekly basis, so I would rank Whittington above him, but Atwell probably has more upside on a given week because of his downfield capacity. So Atwell has been more involved overall, but Whittington has been more targeted the last 2 weeks, and that's kind of shifted for the Rams. Finishing off my must-adds with a quarterback and a tight end. Let's begin with the quarterback, Kirk Cousins. If he is not owned in your league, I think you need to pick him up, especially if you need a quarterback. Cousins has been throwing the ball a lot, and in this current NFL, that's very run-heavy, very defensive, it feels like, and a lot of quarterbacks are not trusted to throw the ball because they don't complete a lot of passes. Cousins is the opposite. He has a 67% completion percentage. He has over 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns, and given the amount of games that are in comebacks for Cousins and the amount of games that are going to the fourth quarter and the amount of points his defense is giving up, the amount of close games the Falcons are going to be in, Cousins is very intriguing despite the limited rushing upside. He seems to have great rapport with Darnell Mooney, good rapport with Drake London. Kyle Pitts was more involved in that pass game against the Bucs, and their run game's been good but not great. Cousins has shown a capacity to be a MVP type of candidate the last couple of games, And I think they trust him a ton. So I think his volume is going to rise. And I think there's going to be plenty of games, maybe not for 500 yards, but for a lot of attempts that are going to put him in the range of being a fantasy viable starter, if not a very good matchup play, because he can definitely dice up a bad defense, as we saw against the Bucs. And my final pickup is Tucker Kraft at tight end. I've talked about him before, but Kraft is basically right now the number 2 receiver in Green Bay. It's him and it's Jaden Reed. And honestly, Reed is more dynamic, downfield, yards after catch, yards per touch, getting him the ball in space, doing that sort of thing. He even caught a deep ball. But Kraft has been involved in screens, involved in dump-offs, yards after catch, is a good blocker. He plays on a lot of snaps. Wicks can't catch the ball right now. Watson is injured. Dobbs wants to be traded. Kraft is a great option at tight end if you're desperate, if you're looking for somebody, because I think he's probably a tight end 1 right now for as long as Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs are doing whatever they're doing, which could be a while. So 22 targets, 16 receptions, 218 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a huge game last week against the Rams. He just is a better athlete and a better yards after catch option than I ever would have given him credit for. That is my final ad. Tucker Kraft in a dynamic Packers explosive offense. Kraft is definitely worth an ad because he gets manufactured touches and Jordan Love likes him. So those are my must ads of week number 6. Thank you guys for watching. Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. We will see you in the next video. Trades. We'll see you then. Peace.